Hey, this is Matt, and welcome to the State of CRM podcast. I'm here with Ben, and today we're actually going to talk about the CRM landscape. So we're going to go a little bit more high level and basically discuss some of the major players in this space. And there's three specific layers when thinking about CRM, which we'll talk a little bit about, and ways that marketers can think about tapping into different capabilities within those layers when they're building their own CRM stacks.
Yeah, exactly, Matt. And these three layers actually are the data layer, the intelligence layer, and the activation layer. The goal is really to share a little bit more on this, each of them today. What we see on the market, the landscape on the ideal stack, or what can you build as a stack as a marketer to fulfill your needs and your communication strategy.
Yeah, exactly. And there's I think marketers need to kind of think about each layer separately, but there's a lot of overlap as well, especially when we start talking about some of the major players. So we'll get into a little bit more of the details around what like each of these layers is meant to achieve and sort of why companies have developed within those spaces. But it's important also to note that there's sort of three different groups of solutions within the space. So you have point solutions that kind of fit specifically within each of those three layers, again, being data, intelligence, and activation. And then you have players that are more broad. So those are broken up into two categories. So you have closed ecosystems, which are essentially companies that have either built or acquired other companies and created closed ecosystems of full stack capabilities. Once a marketer taps into one of those capabilities, they tend to buy into that whole platform and be somewhat locked into that ecosystem. And that's like the Adobes, the Oracles, and the Salesforces of the world. And then in addition to that, you have cloud platforms, which we've actually talked a little bit about in previous podcasts, which we invite you to check out if you're interested in those specifically. But those are like Microsoft, Google GCP, and Amazon AWS as well.
AWS.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's just to be sure that everyone understand that's the fundamental of these layers. That the data layer, for sure, is here to collect your data, to organize the data, and to prepare or leave this data available for any activation or insight. But that's where the intelligence layer is important, because having a lot of data and collecting all this data doesn't worth anything if you don't do something with it. So the intelligence layer is really to help you to get insights from this data, to be able to take decision based on this data sets. And the activation are the channels to activate the data, and the from the intelligence and the strategy you might have built on your data. I mean, we know all of them. And they are growing year after year, but that can be SMS, text, push app, email for sure, push web. We have call center, direct mail. I was about to say digital, but display on digital. That can be a lot of different things, and all these channels that are activated with smartphone or on the digital world. And
yeah, exactly. And I think I think ultimately the goal for marketers is to be able to reach consumers in a multi-channel way, to be able to get them to, either drive awareness or to convert in one way or another. But it kind of all starts back at the data layer. And that's kind of the beginning of the marketer's journey.
So Matt, what's getting a little bit deeper in this data layer? What can we say about how it's built, what it's meant for, how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think thinking of this layer, this even exists because over the last, 20, 25 years since digital really started to take off, and also data collection methodologies and capabilities have become a lot more sophisticated. We kind of went through this era where there was a lot of data. Companies didn't really know how to make use of it. It was difficult to store. It was difficult to action. They knew there was value there, but there wasn't necessarily a way to sort of bring it together and unify it in a way that marketers could really take action with. And that's really what companies in this space have sort of designed their capabilities to achieve. So you have sort of two categories. You have data collection, which is really all about data scraping. So consumers leave footprints in different ways. First of all, there's consumer attributes, who they are, demographic data, things like that. Then you have what they're doing online, so what they're browsing, what they're searching for. That's another data element as well. And then you have sort of the customer data, what they're purchasing. Are they a loyal customer? Are they an infrequent purchaser? Are they a lapsed customer? Things like that. And then you have your own in-house like transaction data, things like that. So it's all of this data sort of sitting in silos, and it is possible to action those data sets, which actually Tiny Clues can help you with. But there are companies that actually have developed capabilities to make that data more unified and to make it easier to take action on. And that's really where the second element comes into play, and that's really data storage and synthesis. So we've talked a lot about CDPs, or customer data platforms, and they've designed their capabilities to essentially not just store data, but to be able to connect the data together to make it actionable, so that when we start talking about the intelligence layer, it's kind of setting that data up in a way where it can be analyzed. You can run deep learning and AI on it and make it actionable for activation, which we had mentioned is the long-term goal.
Yeah, so what you are explaining, that the CDP will centralize the data, gets all this data pipeline from all these different sources. If you have stores, that can come from your store system, the call center, all these different systems that are collecting data points, interaction with your consumers, and bringing that together, unified around the consumer, and basically that's just getting one ID per consumer and getting all these data points, this 1,000 of data points in interaction the brand or your company can have with the consumer, making them available and easy to consume for the intelligence layer.
Yep, 100%. And we're talking about CDPs specifically. We're talking about companies like Amperity, which have built sort of that warehouse capability. And then from a data collection perspective, you have Shopify, you have Magento, these companies that are basically design capabilities to be able to scrape specific data sets. And then what marketers are doing is using those CDPs to bring them together. And then that kind of brings us into the intelligence piece. Oh, and before we move on to that, again, it's important to note that those major sort of cross-layer players or multi-layer players, both from the closed ecosystem perspective, which again are Salesforce, Adobe, Oracle, and sort of the open cloud platform, which is like Google GCP, have capabilities in different ways that sort of sit within these layers as well.
Yeah. So what do we do with all this data, the intelligence layer? What can be done? What's the purpose of this layer?
Yeah, and obviously that's a great question. So I think it's great. Data for data's sake isn't very valuable, right? It's the insights that you can pull out of it that actually bring business value to marketers. And that's really what the intelligence layer is all about, is taking raw data, whether it's structured or siloed or in an in-house data lake, however you have it set up, and basically through an analytics and intelligence, whether that's deep learning or what have you, being able to turn it into something that can be used for activation and can be used to build stronger relationships and convert consumers. And that piece is really what the intelligence layer is all about. And there's kind of different players again in this space. So we can't mention the intelligence layer without mentioning sort of the broad stack platforms again, but I think what's unique in particular is when we start talking about the cloud platforms, they actually will generally partner with more point solutions that marketers can tap into from an intelligence perspective. And that's actually where Tiny Clues fits in. So whether you're a GCP client or not a GCP client, we can work with you, but we're part of the GCP cloud ecosystem so that clients of GCP can sort of tap into Tiny Clues. And using us as an example, we've developed capabilities over 10 years specifically designed for this intelligence piece. And that's running deep learning, sophisticated algorithms to be able to identify and predict buying intent so that marketers can be able to use that to essentially target those who are most likely to buy specific products in their catalog. And the reason that we're able to do that is because we can sort of take data from the data layer, ingest it, and run intelligence on it. But we're not the only players in the space as well. It's important to note, like, there's a lot of the CDPs that are just sort of starting now, maybe a little bit behind, but developing their own segmentation and targeting capabilities. I think in a way we're sort of seeing more and more, not necessarily consolidation, but I think like movement into other layers as companies start to look to compete. So I think, like, again, we've talked a lot about this in the past when we talked about cloud ecosystems and headless CDPs specifically, but we're starting to see sort of like again, three areas, sort of point solutions, but I think we are starting to see consolidation there. The cloud ecosystems, which are more flexible and sort of leaning in on point players to be able to bring into their ecosystem, offer value to their clients that they can tap into as needed. And then sort of the closed ecosystems, which have largely over the years cobbled themselves together through acquisition and sort of development as they've needed to in different areas. But again, the intelligence layer is really all about transforming that data through insights or into insights that can be used for activation in the long run.
Yeah, that's what we do every day with our clients. I mean, that's we if we put that in a really short sentence, that's we help our clients to leverage all this data that all companies are collecting and they are sitting on and leverage this data to take the right action and the right audience in CRM, whatever the channel is. And that's what we'll talk in a minute. That what are the channels? So what is this activation layer we are talking about? That's what are these activation layer? That's the way to activate this intelligence on different with different messages to consumer, to the final consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about kind of using, I mean, activation, we all know it's about reaching customers with your message to be able to get them to take some sort of action. It could be just, general awareness. It could be purchasing your product, visiting a website. But in order to do that, you need to reach them across the channels that they're available on. So that includes email, as we talk about a lot, digital display and video, social media, SMS, in-app push notifications, web notifications. So these are all different touch points that consumers can potentially have with your product or your brand. Activation is all about using those touch points to be able to influence consumers in one way or another. And once you've sort of used or you've transformed your data, which is all, like we just mentioned, the intelligence layer is all about taking that data, building insights around it so that you understand which channels to reach your consumers on and how to reach them, and also which consumers should be reached on each channel, dependent upon what you're trying to achieve, whether it's selling a product or drive awareness, et cetera. And within the activation layer, you kind of have you sort of have like broad players, the marketing cloud. So like Google has its own marketing cloud ecosystem that includes access to its search inventory, DV360, DoubleClick, and so on and so forth. Adobe has a marketing cloud as well. So does Oracle, so does Salesforce. And that's all about like ingesting insights to be able to activate multi-channel.
Yeah, and you mentioned some of them already. I have more here to mention, but again, that's we if we are if we are activating more messages to through push notification, that can be through Airship or Batch, but that can be other player, that can be Criteo for retargeting, that Facebook ads, we mentioned Google too, that every of this channel, I mean, as is its own specialty, or the pro and the pro for some time in the journey of the customer, saying that okay, that's can be in the inbox, email inbox, that can be in the mailbox, that can be on display. All of that build the global journey of the consumer and leads to a better relation. The goal is to build a better relation to between the brand and the consumer.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's important to really make sure. Obviously, the end goal is to build a stack that's end to end and seamless. So starting from data collection and storage all the way through to activation, making sure that one system can speak to another. And when thinking about multi-channel activation, that becomes so important. So it's if you have this layer of intelligence that can tell you how you should hit consumers, who you should be hitting with which messages, like all of the information that your data can provide from an insights perspective, it needs to be able to connect into or to be able to speak to those different platforms. So whether that's the marketing cloud that you're currently using, or if you are, as you had mentioned, using more point solutions to reach people through SMS or even non-digital channels like direct mail,
Yeah.
like you have to be able to connect that data into whatever you're using to be able to activate on that channel. And that those systems need to speak together, or you're going to run into a situation where you're going to have insights that can't be activated against.
Yeah, or the other option is that you'll have all these activation layers that are not talking to each other, and because you don't have this intelligence layer before this activation, you will get your customer to the different activation channels, and they don't talk to each other, so they can't. They don't know, they can't optimize the journey. They can't know that you might received an email, and so the other channel will send you also a push. Maybe it's not intended. Sometimes that can be intended to for you to receive twice the message with different channels, but so the fatigue, the pressure and the fatigue won't be managed correctly. And this connection with an intelligence layer, which is bridging the gap between the data and the activation, is really important. And there are plenty of them. I mean, that's we are specialized in CRM and this. I mean, in all the channel in CRM, but there are a lot of way to do that. I mean, other intelligence platform help to optimize the website experience. How do you personalize a website based on data you have on the consumer? That's another way to activate, but you need the intelligence to activate that on the website.
Yeah, 100%. And I think too, like each channel is, as you mentioned, I don't think there's anyone right now in this space that can understand all of the channels, exactly where consumers have been hit, and then optimize towards the right mix. Like that's still sort of like the holy grail. And to be honest, it's not something I even believe is necessarily achievable, because I think that's not necessarily how people buy. Like I don't think there's an optimal mix. But like you said, it starts at the intelligence layer, so that when you have those insights, you can use them to optimize to each channel specifically, but then also understand how consumers are being reached across those channels, so that you're not over messaging. But like what works for SMS might be different than email, and you can't sort of look at activation layers in silos, even though there's different point solutions, and even the cloud capabilities generally don't do everything from an activation perspective. So really, I think, like to your point, it's an interesting idea. The intelligence layer can also sort of be that point where you start to unify that cross-platform activation strategy.
Yeah, and to your point also at the beginning of the discussion, is you can't. I really think that you can't be an expert on every topic. So I think that's really easy to have a lot of solution features or channel available in a solution, but ultimately you will, as a marketer, you want sometimes to be more precise. You want to be you want more feature, more specific things from a tool perspective for one channel, for one area of activation, and maybe less on another one for another brand that will be something else. And this is the real challenge for marketers, that how to build a sustainable stack for their strategy on the long term. How do you build that and be sure that it can evolve with your strategy at the pace of the evolution of your strategy, and at the pace of the evolution of the behavior of the consumer. We saw that recently with, behavior changed a lot in the past year, and if you are not equipped, you don't have the tool that are able to let you be agile and adapt your strategy and change the way you communicate, you are stuck in the past, and you are losing the game, basically.
Yeah, and that I think, like, when marketers are thinking about, really what they're looking to achieve, and they're like, let's just say they're sort of at the beginning of sort of exploring where they want to bring in solutions. Ultimately, obviously, like, resources are somewhat scarce. You can't invest in everything. So I think, like, it's important to make sure that you're sort of, like, understand the track that you want to go down and, like, what the benefits are. So, and I think that's kind of where, in my mind, like, I think, like, with the closed ecosystems, it can be a little bit tricky. Those are huge investments. And again, we're talking about, like, Oracle, Salesforce, Adobe, et cetera, because you might just be at first starting to look into capability like, oh, I just need, like, an email delivery system, and that's what I'm looking at. But all of a sudden, once you invest in that, when you're starting to look at data unification or getting systems of intelligence in place, they're not interoperable with other platforms. So then you've sort of locked yourself into a situation where you're going to have to invest in additional features within that ecosystem. So, and there's some of them will be great and some of them will be less developed. Like, let's just be honest about that, because they've essentially grown by acquisition and by investing in areas that they don't necessarily have the same level of expertise in. So I think marketers really need to think about, like, not saying that those platforms are or not valuable, but that is a situation where they may be sort of locked into that. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing now. And then, like, obviously other options being, there's the cloud route, which allows you to be able to, I think, like, really effectively start at sort of the data layer, get your data unified in the cloud, and then you can sort of tap into the point solutions that are partners within that ecosystem and develop what you need from an intelligence and an activation perspective to be a little bit more flexible. But it tends to mean that you're not as locked in, or you can kind of build your own stack of point solutions. The challenge there being is you need to make sure, once again, that those systems can speak to each other, because if your CDP doesn't speak to your targeting and intelligence capability, and that doesn't connect into the channels that you want to reach from an activation perspective, you're going to have a broken stack. And that's going to hurt your ROI on your investment, and it's going to make it really difficult to have an effective marketing program.
Yeah, exactly. We know that marketers have a lot of ideas every day, new ideas of new program, new communication, and that's evolving and progressing, and that make this job interesting. You need to think the same way about your stack. If you are this marketer making all this plan and this, I want to test this new messaging, this new creative, this way of communicating to my consumer to see if that's better for them, what are their feedback on that. But you are stuck with the same tool.
Yeah.
If you are locked in within a set of capabilities, that just prevents you to do this all these things. So you can't have a mindset on the idea of the creative or the messaging in a way, and being equipped with another mindset. In another mindset. So that's really something that we believe that it's the right path to make progress over and continue to improve what you are doing. And the good news is that you don't need to start with a big thing, that you don't need to have all these features that sounds good, but you won't use for the next 8-12 months. You can start with what you need right now, and you know that when you have additional steps or milestone coming, you'll be able to add more tool, more platform, more intelligence, depending upon what are your needs of the period, the quarter.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think, like, to that point around sort of like thinking about what you need now and what you need in the long term, it's about, again, sort of what can bring you the most value in the short run, but also where does that long-term investment lie? But, like, also pacing your investment. So the capabilities that you can onboard now should, once again, and we've mentioned this already, but be able to fit in with the stack later on. And that's kind of like what we've been focused on at Tiny Clues is really, and I think the intelligence layer in and of itself gets overlooked. Like, I think marketers sometimes look at the ecosystem as being data and then activation and kind of forget about that middle layer. But that middle layer can actually be a bit of a unifier if you think about it. And, from our point of view, you can use us while you're onboarding your data into a CDP, because the activation layer sort of allows for you to be able to bridge the gap between the two. So whether your data is unstructured or structured, working with an intelligence partner, and then, making sure that that partner can evolve with you as you sort of get your data unified and structured in the way that you want it, whether that's an in-house data lake or a CDP or whatever you're looking to invest in, then your data is going to be ready to be actionable. But you don't have to wait until that happens to start getting value. And I think, we hear time and time again from marketers that we speak to, we'll worry about, running AI and do better targeting and advanced analytics once we get our data in place, like once we have a CDP or once our data lake is built. But the reality of it is if that takes 6 months, if that takes a year and a half, you've lost potentially millions of dollars in revenue while trying to invest in this. And that to me is where marketers are making a big mistake. If you build your stack right, you can do that, but you can simultaneously improve your activation capabilities if you focus on the intelligence layer. And I think that probably, to me, is the most overlooked layer when we're thinking about the stack. And that's kind of why we decided to break it up into 3, where I think traditionally the industry tends to be looked at sort of as like data and activation, but they don't really talk about the thing that connects the two.
And maybe, something that's a takeaway for the audience today is that you can find all this topic and this intelligence layer, at least subject or features or presentation in a lot of, with every players. As you said, Matt, there is a lot of overlap between also these different player covering a lot of ground in data collection, data platform, intelligence, and activation. The thing is that if I can share, the way I was working in the past, and I'm still working at Tiny Clues, is that you don't buy a PowerPoint slide. So if you want something, a feature, or you want to activate a channel, or if you want an intelligence, a tool that bring intelligence on your data to achieve a specific use case, look at what was done in the past. Who are the other, your competition, or the other player working with this tool? What is the expertise? You can't be the expert of every topic at the same time. So we see a lot. We don't talk a lot of the AI and the engine we have and we built, but we built that for years, improved it, as you said. But we are focused only on that. So we are on the very fine tuning of every single piece of this solution, and that can't be the same value as precise, as effective as someone a bigger stack that has an AI feature somewhere in the list of the 20 last company they bought that are not plugging and connecting to each other. There is really, there are a lot of analogies on this concept, but the best of breed, if you really want to push a little bit further in your strategy, sooner or later you need to go into this direction, and that will be very, very much too bad to be locked in with a single ecosystem. Not necessarily one vendor, but sometimes some ecosystem, even if that's some different vendors, that's same ecosystem that is not open to other solution.
Yep, absolutely. I think, in closing, it's really thinking about short-term investment can yield ROI. You don't have to start thinking about intelligence and activation after, I've got my data in place. But you do need to be thinking about whatever I'm investing in now is going to be impacting the options that I have later on. So who I choose to partner with from a data perspective, where I'm getting my intelligence from, and then the channels I choose to run on, and who I choose to partner to be able to activate across those channels. It has to be a long-term strategy.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're gonna trap yourself either in an ecosystem, or you're going to be in a situation where the solutions that you're using aren't going to be able to work well together, and that's the reality marketers will end up facing. So it's okay to think short-term, invest short-term, get that ROI, but also you need to be thinking about what the long-term play is for your stack.
Yeah. Drive all these the 3 tracks at the same time, step by step, instead of just achieving one to the end and starting the next one. That's not linked this way.
Absolutely.
So that was a great topic today. We hope that's gave you a little bit of nice overview on the landscape. And if you have other topics, if you have questions, please send them to us. We'll do our best to answer and to bring our point of view on that. And we'll see you or send you a new episode next week. Have a great week and talk to you later. Bye.